grunge era, so 1992 to 1999, heavy and thrash metal albums. So the reason I picked that time period, obviously when grunge was in its heyday, heavy and thrash metal was in its commercial trough. You know, a lot of bands didn't even survive the decade. They would end up dissolving, but you know, I think because of that, a lot of albums that were released in this time period by heavy and thrash metal bands get overlooked. So I did another video like this a few months ago, but this video is going to be all new bands, all new albums. So let's get into part 2.
Across the desert on the burning darkness which illuminates you.
There will be no Tony Martin era Sabbath slander on the Radon 666 channel. Now, I know some Black Sabbath fans are Ozzy holdouts, you know, Ozzy or nothing. But what if I could entice you to listen to Tony Martin by saying that this album has Geezer Butler on it? And if that doesn't entice you to listen to this album, then let me play a snippet from the second song, Cross of Thorns. Maybe that'll persuade you to give this a spin.
When our promise is broken and no one trusts you and young ones cry.
The album opens up with the kick-ass Eyewitness, and you've also got some pretty heavy riffage on the third song, Psychophobia. But quite frankly, I think when it comes to this album, it gets much better in the second half. The 7th track, Back to Eden, has a really, really cool chorus riff that to me sounds kind of different, at least as far as Black Sabbath's usual sound.
When you're tired of giving reasons, freedom fighting freedom.
You also got the awesome infanticide-themed power ballad, The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. But seriously, why is the super badass Evil Eye all the way at the bottom of this album's track listing, and you have the terrible Virtual Death that gets to feature in the top half on track number 4? Quite frankly, those two songs need to switch places up in the track listing. Come on, Tony, No, not you, Tony Martin. Tony Iommi. Yes, thank you. Alright. Come on, Tony. Tighten up the track listing. One of the nice things about this CD copy that I have is that it's got a bonus track called What's the Use? Which, again, was this a B-side that they cut from the album? Why didn't you just cut Virtual Death? Because What's the Use has some wicked drums in the intro, kick-ass Tony Iommi downpicking, which just gives way into an awesome Tony Martin chorus. Come on! Demolition Hammer is a fitting name for this band because the first time that I heard this album, it felt like taking a wrecking ball straight to the ribcage. This album gets straight into the action with the opener, Skull Fracturing Nightmare, which is a no sign up, no credit card, no bullshit, just straight up pummels your ass like this song is a tank and you are a student in Tiananmen Square. To me, this is what thrash metal should aim towards sounding like. I'm kind of sick of all these new thrash bands that are just doing the pizza thrash style. You know, I'm definitely way more into what I like to call the harder edge thrash, where like every song feels like it's over 200 BPM. You've got kind of raw production. You got harsh vocals over top. And you just have these guitar riffs that are just super heavy and eviscerating. My favorite songs from the album are Skull Fracturing Nightmare, Human Dissection, and the title track, Epidemic of Violence.
He carves his stone. Oh yeah. He carves his...
The first Savatage album to feature Zach Stevens on the vocals instead of John Oliva, but that is no excuse to skimp out on this album. While Zach is a somewhat different vocalist than John Oliva, I think he's got a bit of a lower register. His voice does sound tailor-made for some of the songs on this album, like the title track, He Carves His Stone, and Scraggy's Tomb.
Balanced your dreams upon the edge of thrones, but I don't think about you anymore.
Now, even though he may not be the vocalist, John Oliva is still musically involved with Savatage. For whatever reason on this album, he's only credited as a session guy, but basically he does all the keyboard work and he even plays drums on a handful of tracks through this album. The highlights of John's keyboard playing can be found on the songs Damien and All That I Bleed. Unfortunately, this would be the last Savatage album to feature the legendary guitar player Chris Oliva before he tragically passed away. But on this album, at least, I mean, it goes for the rest of Savatage's discography. He was incredible in everything he did. But for this album, I guess his standout moment for me would be the solos that he has on the track Follow Me. Overall, this album has a pretty diverse sound. You know, you got the song Lights Out, which kind of sounds like a glam metal song to me. You've got some kind of like piano heavy ballad. You got some straight ahead heavy metal. I mean, overall, just a very diverse, very consistent, and just an overall excellent album. Just like Edge of Thorns, Promised Land is a very diverse sounding album. I definitely hear elements of alternative metal and even some bits of grunge kind of finding their way into Queensryche's sound on this album. I Am I kind of reminds me of My Wave by Soundgarden. And maybe this is just me, but I think the wah guitar pedal parts on My Global Mind... Hey, Kirk, get out of here. Get out of here. Sorry. The wah pedal parts, and just those wah pedal parts, I'm not saying the whole song, but just the wah pedal parts of My Global Mind kind of reminds me of Alice in Chains with their songs Rain When I Die and Godsmack. Now, even though this album does have 90s influence, I wouldn't say that Queensryche is basically just capitulating to whatever the music trends of the 90s were. Quite frankly, I think they heard what was going on around them, and they wanted to see what they could do with those sounds, almost like taking it on as an artistic challenge. Not so much adopting that sound just so they can have like a vain, Hail Mary attempt to kind of cheese a Billboard hit. My favorite song on the album has to be the title track. It's very different sounding, very atmospheric, and vocalist Jeff Tate, he hops on the saxophone to do his best Bill Clinton impression. You also got some acoustic guitar songs like Bridge and Out of Mind. Disconnected is very odd sounding, but I think it rules. One More Time is kind of rocking. Like I said, got a very wide array of sounds on this album. But it's very progressive sounding and it kicks ass. Unlike Promised Land, I do not hear a lot of 90s influence on this album. I mean, maybe the production sounds kind of 90s, I guess, but, overall the ethos of these songs are classic thrash, classic Overkill. And it's very refreshing to hear those traits on a 90s Overkill album, because the previous album that they did, 1993's I Hear Black, to me it wasn't very thrashy, sounded like shit, and overall was just kind of a subpar record in my opinion. This album just hooks you in with songs like Where It Hurts and A New High and Lows, and keeps you sticking around with some of the deep cuts like Under One and Up to Zero. Some other tracks of note are the song Fast Junkie, for which the bass intro to that song really reminds me of the Dead Kennedy song Holiday in Cambodia. And you've also got a little 2-minute instrumental track called R.I.P. in parentheses says Undone, which that was actually a tribute song to the late Chris Oliva of Savatage. So, there you go, fun fact. Still Not Black Enough can rock out on the same quality as its predecessor, 1992's The Crimson Idol. And reason I like to compare Still Not Black Enough to this album is that it definitely evokes a lot of the songs off this album, but Still Not Black Enough, I think, opens up W.A.S.P's sound even more. I really like the track Scared to Death. It's got that riff that kind of reminds me of Pink Floyd's Another Brick in the Wall Part 1. And then in the chorus, it has those really awesome, female backing vocals, kind of like Gimme Shelter by the Rolling Stones. You also get a taste of what Hell Dorado, which would be released 4 years after this album, sounds like with the old school, kind of a bluesy rock and roll track, Rock and Roll to Death. And even though I'm not really a fan of these songs, another reason why I'd say this album opens up W.A.S.P sound is that you've got more of these, in my opinion, kind of overly sappy ballads. Songs like Breathe and Keep Holding On, which I know W.A.S.P had some kind of semi-ballad songs in the past, but I don't think he's ever leaned as hard into kind of the sappiness, if you will, as he did on other albums. But of the straight-ahead rockers, which, this is W.A.S.P, that's why we're here, I would say my favorites are Skinwalker, Goodbye America, and Still Not Black Enough. One of those albums that you can just tell from the cover alone is going to kick ass. The 90s were not always the kindest to Helloween. Granted, I think a lot of that was self-inflicted, because you look at 1991's Pink Bubbles Go Ape, that's one of those albums that you can tell by the cover it is going to suck ass. But the band was able to get back on track with 1994's Master of the Rings, and they turned into a bullet train on said track when they dropped this beast in 1996. You got Andy Darris on this album on the vocals, who replaced the original Helloween vocalist Michael Kiske. But just like with Savatage, just because this album doesn't have the original vocalist doesn't mean that you should be skimping on it. Album opener, We Burn, immediately sears your face off with its immaculate chorus, and the party doesn't stop there. You got Steel Tormentor following that up, you got Power following it up. I mean, quite frankly, these songs wouldn't feel out of place if they were on either of the Keeper of the Seven Keys albums.
We've got the power, we are divine. We have the guts to follow the sign.
I could understand some people thinking the song Forever and One, Neverland, is kind of cheesy. But if that song is cheesy, then I'm fucking Chester Cheeto. Before the War is probably my favorite song on the album. I think it just combines, everything that I think Helloween does best. You got shreddy guitars, a very musical and pretty sounding pre-chorus with a super heavy soaring chorus, baby. Come on. I mean, this album just simply doesn't fall off. I mean, maybe a couple songs at the end like Kings Will Be Kings and Mission Motherland. I could kind of take it or leave it.
Not great, not terrible.
But I think the songs If I Knew and the closer track are just absolutely phenomenal and more than pick up the slack. I saved this one for last because I know it's a bit of an odd pick. I imagine some of you might be saying, but Radon 666, Bathory is not a heavier thrash metal band. And you are correct. However, this is a straight-ahead thrash metal album. So why did Bathory, who started off as black metal, then went to Viking metal, why all of a sudden did they then switch to thrash metal? I don't know. But one thing I will concede about this album is that the production is definitely a little bit sus. Especially, speaking as a drummer, I like when the snare has a nice snap and crack to it. And for whatever reason, it sounds like the snare drum has been unlatched when they recorded this album, which, like, you're not Danny Carey playing progressive metal. This is like harder edge technical thrash. I need to hear that snare drum snap, crackle, and pop. Despite the album's percussive shortcomings, these riffs are amazing. I have a feeling Corthon must have heard the Demolition hammer and he must have got infected with the epidemic of violence. Haha, get it? This is definitely not the first thrash metal album that I'd hand to an aspiring fan, but more so to someone who's a veteran of the genre. I mean, I don't know, maybe you never thought to look in Bathory's discography to find some new thrash to listen to. Although I will give you a quick tip. You can go ahead and just skip Octagon, which is the other Bathory thrash album. I mean, quite frankly, the only way you could say that album was ahead of its time is the fact that it came out 8 years before Saint Anger. So in other words, the album sucks. But my favorites from this album, Requiem, are War Machine, Prostitution, and Pax Vobiscum or something. I don't know. So yeah, there we go. That is my list. That is 8 more of my favorite, heavy and thrash metal albums from 1992 to 1999. What is the moral of the story? What did we learn, after watching this video? I don't know.